Hello everybody and welcome back to Sophisticakes by Mary. For this video, I'm going to show you how I made this trendy crackled fondant cake with bas relief and a little bit of a copper accent. So if this sounds good to you, stick around and we'll get right to it after the intro. So first thing I needed to do was get my bas relief ready. Bas relief is just a raised textured pattern that you add to a cake. I guess that's my best way of describing it. So I used all these different molds to add these accents to make it out of. So I did some floral and I did some leaves and I did a couple birds. And I'm just using regular fondant. This time I did, I believe, this is the satin ice. I'm not sure if I used the marshmallow fondant on this one or not. So what I do is I just dust the molds with some corn flour, or cornstarch, I'm sorry. And then I add the fondant in, and I just kind of push it in, try to work it into all the nooks and crannies, and cut off any excess that might be sticking out from the back there. And I went ahead and put them on a paper towel on a cookie sheet and just set it to the side until I was ready to use it. And since I wanted this fondant to this texture to kind of conform to the shape of the cake, I didn't do this far in advance. I just did this maybe an hour or two beforehand because I didn't want it to crack when I applied it onto the cake. I also added a little bit of fondant lace. These are just some lace molds that I have that I add some cornstarch to again, and just finagle and get that fondant into the lace pattern. Try not to add a whole lot of the fondant at once. Just kind of work it in because you don't need a real thick amount of it. Work it in as you go. Add more if you need to. And I did not add Tylose this time because I didn't want it to firm up excessively quickly. Like I said, I wanted to be able to work with it to add it to the cake and have it be still flexible and moldable. Now I did put the lace into the refrigerator for just a couple minutes before I removed it from the mold. The other ones I didn't, but this I did. I don't know why. Just because I guess sometimes when you pull a lace out of the mold like that, it can stretch a little and I didn't want it to do that. So that kind of helps prevent that a little bit. But you don't want to leave it in there so long that it gets too firm. Now I'm adding my second layer of buttercream to an already crumb-coated cake. This is a 6-inch cake. And I'm just need maybe a 1/4 inch thick layer of buttercream. You don't want a whole lot of buttercream underneath your fondant because it can kind of be pushed around and kind of deform the look of the fondant a little bit. You get some lumps and you don't want that. So just enough so that you can't see through it so well, as I guess a good way to put it. You could still see through it here and there, but not a whole lot. And to find out how much fondant I need to roll out, I measure the top and the sides. And you add those all together. And that tells you how big you need your fondant to be rolled out to. And to add the color I'm going to use in a bit, I just used the same color that I used in the fondant, which is a mint green. Added a little bit of white to it to lighten it up, and then some Everclear to make a paint out of it. Now roll out your fondant, not exactly to the thickness that you're going to need at the end, because to get the crackle effect, see how it's about a little over 1/4 inch thick, a little bit more than that, because once you get your crackle, to get your crackle effect, you have to roll it out a little bit more, and you need to allow for that before you do your crackle effect. Just make sure that you leave a little bit of thickness, more so than you would normally. Now I'm just brushing on that paint that I made. Get a good thick coat on there, and then use a creme brulee torch is what this is. And you're kind of just toasting it. You want it to almost bubble up a little bit. You're kind of cooking it into the fondant is kind of what's happening. And don't leave it in one spot too long because you don't want it to turn brown. When it starts bubbling, like you can see in those spots there that are a little darker, you know you need to keep moving it around. And this, just make sure you get all of the surface. Otherwise, it'll be obvious when you try to get the crackle effect that you missed some spots. Now, I added a little bit of the sugar crystals to it. Hindsight, I kind of wish I hadn't, because it did, in my opinion, take away a little bit from the crackle effect. It added more pitting to it. And that wasn't actually what I was going for. I mean, it's kind of a neat texture, but it wasn't exactly what I was going for. So if you do like this look, what I did was I just put it on and pressed it in before I rolled it out. And let it dry. Dry to the touch. And when you can tell when it's ready to be rolled out, when it crackles like that, when you push a little pressure underneath it. And just use your rolling pin and roll it out to your normal thickness that you would with fondant. And you'll see that crackle effect happening. Now there, I was just making sure that that I had rolled it out enough. And I took the cake out of the fridge that I had in there firming up while I worked with the fondant, and added just a little thin layer of shortening onto the buttercream to get the fondant to stick to it. Now, as you are working with this, since it's got texture and it's got added on crystals in the fondant, it's gonna want to rip and tear on you a little bit. But you know what? With this look, it's okay, because it's more of a textured look. It's okay. Just, you know what? Go with it. That's what you wanted to do, right? Nobody knows but you. And go ahead and smooth it onto your surface and remove the excess along the bottom. Now I'm just pushing that fondant down to the bottom a little bit more, adding a little cornstarch to dry it out a little bit, because I had removed it from the refrigerator, so it had a little condensation. Add a little cornstarch to keep your fondant smoother from sticking. Adding some texture of some veining, kind of like a veining technique into this fondant, adding a little bit more interest to it. Just randomly placing these. And I'm using my veining tool to do that. Now, I added some white, is kind of a whitewash, is what I'm doing, because I wanted to mute down the brightness of the mint just a little bit. And all that is white food coloring added with some Everclear added to it. Then I use a paper towel that I have some Everclear on to remove the excess. Now I'm adding the bas relief onto the fondant, still while it's wet. I didn't wait. I just go ahead, and because that wetness from the paint is going to help it stick. And you can see that they're still flexible, and that's why I did these closer to the time that I was going to apply them to the cake, instead of like I would traditionally do and do them ahead of time and let them dry up a little bit. You don't need to with this technique. Now just kind of eyeball it. See where it looks like these pieces will fit. That's why you do a variety of sizes and shapes, so that you can fill in your spaces. Now I am just adding the lace to the upper part of the cake for another different texture. And adding those little birds. I don't know why. I love these birds so much. I think they're just so cute. They add a pretty little touch. They're actually tropical birds, but when you add them to a cake like this, and you don't have any other tropical elements, that kind of doesn't make them stand out as tropical anymore. Until I mention it, of course, so now you know. Don't hold it against me, please. And just a little bit more bas relief on that side to kind of balance it out. Now I'm going in and I'm just cutting out sections. Cutting straight down to the buttercream. Not through the buttercream, but to the buttercream. So that I can add that copper accent. So that it looks like it's actually on the cake underneath the fondant. Like that is the color of the entire thing. It's an optical illusion. Nobody knows that you just added it to these parts. That's so much part of the fun for me when it comes to cake design, is breaking down a design and figuring out how to get it to look like it is something that it's actually not. I just find that fascinating. And once you get those where you want them, you'll just use your copper luster dust added and add some Everclear, vodka, or even lemon extract to it. And then use your paintbrush to just brush it on to the buttercream. You can paint on buttercream, it's just fine. Well, and apparently I need to add that whitewash. Sorry, I jumped ahead. That whitewash onto the bas relief so that it coordinates with the rest of the cake more. And I did the same thing with the birds and the lace. You're just kind of adding it to the raised parts more than anything and dabbing off the excess with your paper towel dipped in Everclear again. So I did add some of that copper into those veins that I used the Dresden tool to create. And some of them I just faded it out so that it didn't go all the way to the very end of the crack, because cracks don't go all the way down through the entire way, right? It's kind of a gradual thing till you get to the deeper section of these cracks. And I did add a little bit of just brown color dust. This is just, it's not mixed with anything. It's just the dust itself, the powder. And that just was to kind of age the bas relief a little bit, give it kind of a more aged look, and actually to make it stand out just a little bit. I just kind of touched around the edges of it, kind of shadowed it, and added some to high points. High points and where shadowing might happen. And to finish off this cake, I just used some silk flowers that I already had, and they are wrapped with your floral tape. Actually, I don't know if they all are, but you know what? They would be if it were for an actual order, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So I might not have wrapped the other two, but I would if somebody had ordered this. And then this is just some wire. It's wrapped wire, floral wire that so you don't need to worry about covering that because it's already wrapped, and it's just in a brown shade. And I just wrap it around my rolling pin, my fondant roller, the small one, to give it some movement, and then just stuck it right in the cake. So there you go, guys. Here's my crackled fondant bas relief cake with some copper accents. I hope you like what you saw. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell so you get notified when I upload new videos. And I appreciate you watching, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys. Bye.